He bought a forgotten ranch for $1. 3 months later, his plow struck a box buried for 2 centuries, and everything changed. It started at dawn. Porter Barrow opened his cabin door to find a pale man holding out a deed with shaking hands. His name was Cyrus Yarrow. It looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, kept glancing at the horizon like he expected someone to appear. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Take it, $1. That's all I'm asking." Porter looked at the paper. 3,000 acres, prime grazing land, for the cost of a cup of coffee. Something felt off. Either this man was mad, or there was something really bad about the place. But Cyrus didn't talk like a man running a scam. He looked like a man trying to get away from something. "What's the catch?" Porter asked. Cyrus shook his head hard. "No questions. Just don't dig too deep into the past. Some things should stay buried." The word buried stuck in Porter's mind like a thorn. Before he could reply, Cyrus shoved the deed into his hand along with an old silver dollar and disappeared into the mist like a man escaping daylight. That was 3 months back. Now Porter stood in his north pasture, staring down at what his plow had unearthed. A half-rotted wooden chest, carved with strange markings he didn't recognize. But it wasn't the chest that stopped his breath. It was what surrounded it. Bones. Human bones. A full set, half covered in soil, and in one bony hand, a letter. Still sealed, still whole, as if it had waited. The name on it was faint but clear. L. Mercer. Porter's hands shook as he picked it. Hup. He had no idea this moment would unravel a truth so old and dangerous. People had killed to keep it hidden, and that the quiet woman he'd been courting in town, Lydia Mercer, was tied to it all. The seal cracked as he pressed his thumb into it. Inside, the handwriting was graceful but fading. Each word written like the writer knew it might be their last. "My dearest Lydia, if you are reading this, then the truth I feared to speak has surfaced. What they did to your grandfather was not justice. It was murder, disguised as law." Porter's breath caught in his chest. This wasn't history. This was an accusation. The gold they claimed he stole was never stolen. It was payment. Blood money for services rendered to men who now sit in power. They buried him without a name to silence him, but I have kept proof of what they did. Go to the oak split by lightning on the eastern ridge. Beneath its roots lies evidence that will clear your family's name and ruin theirs. It was signed M, and dated exactly 200 years ago, to the day. Porter stared at the bones, half sunken in dirt. Someone had died here, murdered, hidden alongside this letter. But who was M? And why did they risk everything to send a message to someone named Lydia Mercer? His thoughts turned to Lydia, the kind woman at the general store who flinched at mentions of town history. She always looked uneasy when folks spoke of old ranch families. Could this be tied to her? A sound pulled him back. Hoofbeats. Fast ones, through. The shimmer of heat rising from the prairie, Porter saw a rider coming hard. He folded the letter and stuffed it in his vest. Then quickly kicked dirt back over the bones, hiding them. Something told him this wasn't the time to ask for help. The rider drew closer. It was Sheriff Coleman, a man who spent more time guarding old money than upholding justice. The sheriff's face was tight. His eyes dropped to the loose soil. "Afternoon, Barrow," he said, stepping down from his horse. "Heard you've been doing some digging." "Just clearing rocks," Porter said, trying to sound calm. "Nothing to see." But Coleman's gaze lingered on the earth. Dark stains were still visible, the kind that didn't come from roots. He stepped forward, resting a hand on the butt of his revolver. "Funny thing about this land," he said slowly, and Porter knew he wasn't the only one watching the past. "Previous owners always seem to have accidents," Sheriff Coleman said, tone calm but sharp. "Maybe you ought to be more careful what you dig up out here." There wasn't a hint of kindness in his voice. Just warning, plain as day. Porter felt the letter inside his vest like it was made of fire, but he kept his face steady. Around them, the wind kicked up dry dust, carrying with it the scent of turned earth, and something older. "Accidents?" Porter asked, trying to play it off. "What kind?" Coleman's smile was slow and cold. The permanent kind. This land has a way of keeping secrets buried, Barrow. Smart men don't ask too many questions about things that happened before their time, and just like that, he turned his horse and rode off, leaving only hoofprints and suspicion behind. Him. Once the sheriff was gone, Porter waited for the dust to settle. Then he returned to the gravesite. His mind spun. If Coleman was part of keeping this secret quiet, then that letter might be more than history. The corruption it spoke of wasn't just old ghosts. It was still breathing, still watching. Men, with power 2 centuries ago, could have passed it down, just like land or money. That evening, Porter saddled his horse and rode into town. The letter was tucked deep in his saddlebags. He needed to find Lydia Mercer. The general store was nearly closed when he arrived. Through the window, he saw her organizing shelves with quiet focus. She looked up when the bell above the door chimed. Her face lit up when she saw him, but Porter caught something behind the smile. A flicker of worry, like she sensed he brought something dangerous with him. "Porter, wasn't expecting you," she said softly, smoothing back her dark hair. "How's the ranch treating you?" "It's full of surprises," he answered, voice low. "I keep learning more about its past." Her face paled. Her hands, steady a moment ago, began to tremble as she stacked canned goods. "History gets complicated around here," she said. "Some stories are better left alone." Porter stepped in closer, his voice nearly a whisper. "What if someone found proof an innocent man was killed, and that the folks who did it still had their hands in things?" Lydia's breath caught. She looked to the windows, then hurried over to lock the front door. When she turned back, her eyes were glassy with tears. "My great-great-grandfather was hanged for stealing gold," she whispered. "Gold he never touched. My family's carried. That shame for generations. We've been treated like thieves ever since." Porter's pulse thundered. "What if I told you? I found something that could clear his name." Hope flickered in her eyes, but before she could answer, both of them froze. A shadow passed the front window. Slow. Watching. Porter saw it. A flash of polished boots, clothes too fine for a ranch. Hand. Lydia saw it too. Her face went white. "They know," she breathed. "They know we're talking about it." Without hesitation, Porter grabbed her hand. "We need to go. Now." They slipped out the back door, just as heavy footsteps approached. The front. In the moonlight, Porter spotted 3 men flanking the building. Broad shoulders, wide hats low over their faces. They weren't here to shop. They moved like men trained for quiet work. The kind that didn't leave witnesses. "Where can we go?" Lydia whispered, eyes wide. "My ranch," Porter said. "There's more buried out there. Something we need to find before they do." The ride through the dark was tight and silent. Every rustle of leaves made them flinch. Every gust of wind sounded like pursuit. Porter kept glancing back, but the road behind stayed still. Too still. It felt like a trap had been sprung, and the spring hadn't snapped yet. When they reached the ranch, Porter led her straight toward the ridge. The old letter had mentioned a lightning-struck oak. It wasn't hard to find. The tree stood, crooked and split, like it had taken a hit straight from the sky. Its massive trunk twisted like an old scar, its branches clawing at the stars. "Help me dig," Porter said, handing her a shovel from the barn. They worked fast, tearing through the dirt around the gnarled roots. His muscles ached, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Whatever was down there, people had killed to keep it hidden, and they still were. Then, clink. Lydia's shovel hit something solid. "Porter," she whispered, breath catching. "There's something here." Together they uncovered a small metal box, smaller than the chest Porter had found before, but aged the same way, same markings, same time period. Inside, wrapped tight in oiled cloth, were documents that made Porter's blood turn cold. Land deeds, sworn confessions, and records, detailed ones, that laid out a conspiracy so deep it touched the highest ranks of territorial government. "Dear God," Lydia whispered, reading over his shoulder. "They framed my ancestor just to steal his gold claim." Flipped another page, her hand trembled. "Look at these names: Judge Harrison, Marshal Wickham, Land Commissioner Bradford. This wasn't some outlaw gang, this was organized." Porter scanned the papers more carefully now. These named, they're still around. The Harrisons own the biggest bank in 3 counties. The Wickhams, they've been sheriffs and judges for generations. He paused. Bradford, what is it? Lydia asked. Bradford's Coleman's middle name. Sheriff Thomas Bradford Coleman. I've seen it on town records. The realization sank in like a stone. Porter looked at her, face tight with fear. We're not just dealing with the descendants of the men who did this. We're dealing with the same families. They've been covering it up for 200 years. In the distance, hooves thundered, fast, closing in. Porter counted at least 6 riders coming straight for them through the dark. They'd been followed. Someone's been watching us since we left town, he said. Lydia clutched the documents to her chest. What do we do now? She asked, voice shaking. We run, Porter said, grabbing her hand, and pray these papers are enough to tear down an empire built on murder. They ran, crashing through the brush, branches clawing at them as voices called out behind them. The riders had reached the oak tree and found the dig site. Porter could hear them shouting, forming a wide search. Fan out, one barked. Find them before they reach the road. Sheriff Coleman's voice rang clear through the trees, cold, commanding. The law was hunting them now. They ducked into a narrow canyon Porter remembered from his early ranching days. Behind, a tangle of fallen rocks they crouched, breathing hard, listening. In the moonlight they opened the papers again. What they found was worse than either had imagined. Look here, Lydia whispered, pointing to a map. Gold deposits, dozens of them. The map was hand-drawn, marked with precise locations across the territory. They didn't just steal one claim, she said. They killed anyone who found gold, then claimed the land for themselves. Porter traced the dots on the page with his finger. Every major ranch, every mine, all of it stolen. He looked at Lydia. This whole territory was built on buried bodies and forged deeds. Her eyes filled with tears as she unfolded a smaller letter tucked among the documents. This one's from E.M., she said. Emma Mercer, my great-great-grandmother. She wrote it after they hanged her husband. The letter told it plain Emma had watched the hanging. She'd taken the papers and run before they could silence her too. She'd seen the gold, real gold, big chunks of it, hidden in a cave system beneath the ranch. Those men they'd called thieves. They weren't. They were prospectors. And they'd found something too valuable for crooked officials to ignore. Lydia's grip tightened on Porter's arm. If the gold's still down there, it's enough to ruin every powerful family in this region. Porter nodded. And enough to finally bring justice. Suddenly, crack, the crunch of boots on gravel made them freeze. Just outside the canyon wall, 2 voices. The boss says it ends tonight, one said. If they've seen the papers, they don't leave breathing. A pause. Then Coleman's voice. Too late for an accident. We'll say they were trespassers. Claimed they resisted arrest. No one will question it. Porter felt Lydia's fingers find his in the dark. They were surrounded, hunted. No badge would protect them now, but somewhere beneath their feet was gold. And not just wealth, proof. Proof of murder, proof of theft. If they could survive the night, that proof might be enough to burn it all down. The footsteps faded, but Porter knew it wouldn't be for long. Coleman and his men wouldn't stop searching before daylight. And come morning, this canyon wouldn't offer them a lick of cover. There's something else, Lydia whispered, eyes scanning the last sheet in Emma's bundle. She mentioned a tunnel behind the waterfall at Devil's Creek. If we can get to it. Footsteps cut her off, stone on stone. Someone was coming back. If you're enjoying this tale of buried secrets and deadly discoveries, make sure to like and subscribe for more frontier stories, just like this. Your support keeps these legends alive. Porter held a finger to his lips. Through a narrow gap in the rocks, he spotted a figure with a rifle, moving slow, checking every crevice like he meant to find something. Lydia clutched the documents tighter. Barely breathing, one slip, one sound, and it was over. The boot stopped just above them, grinding on stone, turning, listening. Anything. Coleman's voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the canyon. Not yet, the man answered. But they're here. Tracks lead right to this spot. Porter's heart pounded. His mind raced. Devil's Creek was half a mile off, but rough terrain made it feel like 10. Staying put meant waiting for a bullet. He met Lydia's eyes, then motioned deeper into the canyon. 3 fingers, a silent count. 1, 2, 3. They broke from cover like deer spooked by thunder, boots hitting stone hard as shouts rang out behind them. A rifle cracked, then another. Bullets sparked off rocks near their heads. Porter grabbed Lydia's hand and pulled her fast, twisting through narrow cuts in the canyon he'd explored his first weeks here. "There!" Coleman's voice shouted. "East side! Cut 'em off before they hit the creek!" Porter ran harder. He knew these trails better than the men behind him, but not by much. In the dark, every bend looked the same. Every ridge hid risk. The sound of rushing water grew louder. So did the pounding of hooves. They broke into the open, lungs burning, legs aching. There it was, the waterfall. Moonlight hit the tumbling sheet of water just right, painting it silver. But so were the riders. 6 of them, their silhouettes blocked. The gap between Porter and the creek. "We're trapped," Lydia said under her breath. Porter scanned the land. The creek ran too wide to leap and too fast to cross without getting swept. But there was one chance, a narrow ledge, carved naturally into the canyon wall, high and hidden. It curved around the bend toward the falls, exposed, but out of rifle. "Range from below. Can you climb?" he asked. Lydia didn't hesitate. "Better than I can outrun a bullet." They started moving, pressed flat against the stone, toes feeling along the edge. Below, the creek roared loud enough to cover their scrambling, but the path was slick. One misstep meant falling 50 feet onto jagged rocks. Halfway across, Porter heard Coleman again. Closer. "They're headed for the waterfall." He shouted. "Johnson, take 3 men, circle around. We'll pin 'em at the cave entrance." Porter's blood ran cold. Coleman knew. This wasn't just a chase. It was a setup. They were being herded, straight into a trap. But turning back wasn't an option. Behind them, certain capture. Ahead, a tunnel Emma Mercer had trusted with her life. As they reached the falls, mist coated their faces. The roar drowned every other sound. Porter found the break in the stone, a narrow slit tucked just behind the crashing water. "This is it," he said. Without another word, they slipped behind the curtain of water. Inside was dark, wet, and tight. The walls were smooth and cold, cut from living rock generations ago. The tunnel wasn't natural. It had been carved with purpose. The air was thick with earth and time, holding the scent of rusted metal and secrets too long buried. Porter struck. A match. Shadows danced across the stone walls, revealing deep carvings, symbols he didn't recognize, tools rusted to the floor, and an old lantern waiting in the corner. They were inside, safe for now. But just behind the falls, men with guns still hunted them, and somewhere in this tunnel was the truth that could bring them all down. Porter lit the oil lamp he'd carried from the ranch. The flame flared, casting long shadows down a passage that stretched beyond the reach of its light. "They'll follow us," Lydia whispered, water still dripping from her hair. "I'm counting on it," Porter said quietly. "But first we find what your ancestor died trying to protect." They pressed deeper into the tunnel. Their footsteps echoed off cold stone, the walls seeming to close in with every step. Tool marks scarred the rock, rough, desperate carvings from men who had worked in silence, hiding something worth killing for. The passage widened into a hollowed-out chamber. As Porter raised the lamp, both he and Lydia gasped. Canvas sacks lined the walls, stacked neat and marked with seals from the old territorial government. But it wasn't the gold that stopped Porter's heart. It was the bones. Dozens of them. Skeletons lay crumpled around the treasure. Men who'd been brought here and murdered, their bodies left to rot beside what they never got to spend. "Dear God," Lydia breathed. "They didn't just steal the gold, they executed them." Porter moved closer, holding the lamp over the remains. Wedding bands, pocket watches, faded letters. Each item told a story of a man who'd only made one mistake, knowing too much. Then, under one of the skeletons, Porter spotted a leather satchel. Inside was the worst discovery yet. More documents, fresh ones. He pulled out a ledger. The ink still sharp, the handwriting too modern to be 2 centuries old. "Lydia," he said, voice tight, "these entries, they're recent, some from the last 5 years. The pages laid it bare, proof that the killings hadn't stopped. They'd evolved, hidden behind bureaucracy. Land fraud, targeted murders, quiet payoffs, all of it recorded with cold precision. And then Porter saw the final entry. Transaction complete. Peeb Barrow Ranch purchase. Subject eliminated per standard. Protocol. Property secured for excavation. Porter froze. He looked at Lydia, horror creeping across his face. They planned this from the start, he whispered. Cyrus didn't sell me the ranch because he was desperate. He sold it because he was told to. He swallowed hard. I wasn't supposed to live. I was supposed to find the evidence and then vanish just like all the others. Footsteps splashed at the tunnel's mouth, cutting off her reply. Coleman's voice echoed through the stone, calm and taunting. End of the line. Barrow, you've served your purpose. Now join the rest of the folks who didn't know when to quit. Porter blew out the lamp. Darkness swallowed them. Moments later, flashlights cut through the black. Coleman's men entering the chamber one by one, weapons raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Porter saw the real horror now. This wasn't about hiding the past. It was about silencing the present. They'd walked straight into the graveyard for anyone who got too close. Sheriff Coleman stepped forward, flanked by 4 men, their lights flickering across piles of gold and scattered bones. His face was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came from doing this before. Impressive, isn't it? He said, motioning toward the stacks. 200 years of cleaning up problems. Every man who found this place thought he was the first, just like you. Porter steadied his voice. You made one mistake, Coleman. Oh? The sheriff raised an eyebrow. And what's that? I didn't come here alone. For the first time, Coleman blinked. You're bluffing, he said. But the edge in his voice gave him away. Porter reached into his vest and pulled a folded sheet. It wasn't from Emma Mercer. It was his own, written hours earlier at the ranch. I made copies of everything, every deed, every name in that ledger, every scrap of proof tying you and your men to murder. He stepped forward, holding the paper steady. They're already on their way to the territorial governor, along with a signed statement detailing how you lured me here to die. Coleman didn't speak. He didn't have to. The shadows on his face said everything. This wasn't just a failed cleanup. It was the beginning of a reckoning. You're lying, Coleman snarled, but sweat had already begun to gather at his brow. Porter stepped forward, calm and steady. The courier left at midnight, he said. Everything we found is heading straight to Governor Williams. If we don't return by dawn, it goes public. He let that sink in. That gives you about 3 hours before the whole territorial government learns exactly what you've been hiding. Lydia picked it up without missing a beat. Judge Harrison, Marshal Wickham, Land Commissioner Bradford, all named in those ledgers. Even if you kill us, you can't kill what's already in motion. One of Coleman's men shifted. Boss, he said quietly. What if he's not, Coleman snapped, but his voice cracked. He couldn't be sure. That was the beauty of it. Porter had spun the kind of lie that couldn't be checked without leaving the chamber. And with every passing second, it felt more and more like the truth. There's something else you don't know, Porter added, voice low and even. Cyrus Yarrow didn't vanish. He's been at my ranch for 3 months, documenting everything. If I don't come back, he goes straight to the federal marshals. It was a gamble. Cyrus had disappeared weeks ago, but Coleman didn't know that, and judging by the way the color drained from his face, the sheriff was no longer sure of anything. His empire, so carefully protected for generations, was cracking right there in the flickering lantern light. Even if I let you walk out of here, Coleman said slowly, you'll destroy everything, towns, families, the entire foundation. Good, Lydia said. Her voice was steady, her eyes full of fire. It was built on murder. It deserves to fall. Coleman raised his weapon, hands shaking. Rage, fear, and desperation boiled behind his eyes. Then you die knowing you took innocent lives with the guilty. Porter stood his ground. You fire that shot, he said, and every word in my confession becomes fact. Let us walk, and maybe we'll find a way to spare those who didn't know. But if you kill us, you seal the story with blood. The sheriff's hand trembled. He was cornered. No good choice left. Every second that passed chipped away at his grip on the situation. Porter saw it. This was the moment. The last chance. You've got 1 minute, he said quietly. The truth's already on its way. The only question is whether you want to add 2 more names to the list." Coleman's jaw clenched. Then slowly he lowered his gun. His voice was bitter. "Walk away. But know this. You've broken more than you've saved." Porter didn't reply. He and Lydia backed away toward the second tunnel Emma Mercer had marked, an escape the original conspirators never knew existed. Coleman didn't follow, but his curses echoed after them, bouncing off the stone like the final breaths of a fallen kingdom. 3 days later, Porter's confession became fact. He and Lydia delivered every document, every ledger, and their sworn testimony to the territorial officials. The fallout was swift and historic. The story tore through the region like wildfire. Judge Harrison was found dead in his study the day after his arrest warrant was signed. 1 bullet, no note. Marshal Wickham fled south, caught near the Mexican border with saddlebags full of stolen gold. Commissioner Bradford tried to torch the archives, but investigators moved too fast. As for Sheriff Coleman, he was caught red-handed, literally, trying to dynamite the tunnel entrance. He died 18 months later in a prison infirmary. He never gave up a single name. The gold found in the cavern was returned to its rightful descendants, families who'd lived under the shadow of false convictions for generations. Lydia's family was among them, honor restored. At last, the recovered. Wealth transformed dozens of lives across the territory. And Porter, he kept the ranch, but it became something more than grazing land. He turned the eastern ridge into sacred ground, a memorial cemetery for the men who died protecting the truth. Every skeleton was given a proper burial, every grave marked with the names time had tried to erase. 6 months later, on a quiet morning, Porter stood at the altar of the town's small chapel. Lydia walked toward him in a simple white dress, wildflowers in her hands, peace in her smile. Their wedding was attended by the children and grandchildren of the men who'd once been called criminals. Now they were honored as heroes. As he took her hand and recited his vows, Porter thought back to that morning when a stranger had handed him a deed for $1. He didn't find gold that day, he found the truth, and in the untamed frontier that was the rarest treasure of all.